The gunshots echoed across the shipping dock as Ethan Cole pressed his bleeding shoulder against the cold steel container. Victoria Hale crouched beside him with terror in her eyes. 12 years ago, he'd pulled her from a burning subway tunnel and disappeared into the shadows. Now the ghosts from his erased past had finally caught up, and the billionaire CEO, who'd spent $60 million searching for her mysterious rescuer, was about to discover that some men aren't meant to be found. Because the people hunting Ethan didn't just want him dead. They wanted everyone who knew his face erased from existence. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're from, so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all started. The fluorescent lights in the basement of Hale Dynamics flickered exactly 3 times before dying completely. Ethan Cole didn't bother looking up from the circuit panel. He'd replaced these same lights 4 times in the past 6 months, and each time the building's ancient electrical system found new ways to fail. His hands moved through the darkness with practiced efficiency, fingers finding wire connections by memory while his headlamp cut a narrow beam through the shadows. "Come on," he muttered, twisting 2 copper wires together. "Just work." The light stuttered back to life, bathing the concrete walls in harsh white light. Ethan checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. Sophie's babysitter would charge him extra if he got home after midnight, and he was already pushing it. He grabbed his toolbox and headed for the service elevator, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridor. At 32, Ethan had perfected the art of being invisible. He wore the same gray maintenance uniform every shift, kept his hair short and unremarkable, and made sure his ID badge photo was slightly out of focus. When executives passed him in the hallways, their eyes slid right over him like he was part of the furniture. That's exactly how he wanted it. The elevator climbed toward the ground floor, and Ethan let his mind drift to the more important parts of his life. Sophie had a science project due Friday, something about volcanoes. He'd need to pick up baking soda and food coloring tomorrow, maybe grab some poster board if the dollar store on Atlantic Avenue still had any in stock. Normal dad stuff. Normal life. The elevator jerked to a stop on the 42nd floor. Ethan's hand instinctively moved toward the knife hidden in his boot before he caught himself. Old habits. Dangerous habits. He forced his breathing to stay steady as the doors slid open. A woman stood in the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear. Even in the dim after-hours lighting, Ethan recognized Victoria Hale immediately. Everyone who worked in this building knew her face. The CEO who'd built Hale Dynamics from a struggling startup into a tech empire worth $40 billion. She was younger than most people expected, only 35, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back in a style that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. "I don't care what the board thinks," Victoria said into her phone, her voice cold and precise. "If Marcus wants to challenge the merger terms, tell him to do it in writing so I have documentation when I replace him." She stepped into the elevator without looking at Ethan, still focused on her call. He moved to the side, making himself smaller, invisible. But as the doors closed and the elevator began its descent, Victoria's eyes flicked toward him for just a second. Her gaze caught on the scar near his jawline, a thin white line that curved from his ear to his chin. Ethan saw the moment of recognition flash across her face. Not recognition of him exactly, but recognition of something, a memory trying to surface. He looked away quickly, studying the floor numbers as they descended. 41, 40, 39. "I'll call you back," Victoria said, ending her conversation. She slipped her phone into her jacket pocket. The elevator continued its smooth descent. 28, 27, 26. "Do you work in maintenance?" Victoria asked. Her voice was different now, softer, almost uncertain. Ethan kept his eyes on the floor display. "Yes, ma'am." "How long have you been with the company?" 3 years. The lie came easily. He'd been working here for almost 5, but his employment records only went back 3. Everything before that had been carefully erased and rewritten. 15, 14, 13. "What's your name?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He could feel her watching him now, really watching him, in a way that made his skin crawl with warning signals. "Ethan Cole, ma'am." The elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened. Ethan stepped out quickly, his toolbox heavy in his hand. He could feel Victoria's eyes on his back as he walked across the lobby toward the employee exit. Every instinct screamed at him to look back, to confirm whether she was still watching, but he kept moving. The night air hit him like a cold slap when he pushed through the doors onto the street. Brooklyn stretched out before him in a maze of concrete and steel, the familiar landscape of his carefully constructed, ordinary life. He walked 3 blocks before allowing himself to breathe normally again. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, Sophie's babysitter. She fell asleep during homework. Again, see you soon. Ethan smiled despite the tension still coiled in his chest. Sophie had inherited his ability to fall asleep anywhere, though hopefully none of his other talents. She was 8 years old and thought her dad fixed electrical problems for a living. That's all she needed to know. That's all anyone needed to know. The subway platform was nearly empty at this hour. Ethan stood near the edge, watching his reflection in the dark tunnel. The scar on his jaw looked more prominent in the fluorescent light. He touched it absently, remembering the night he got it. 12 years ago. A different life, a different name. The subway train burst from the tunnel with a screech of metal on metal, and for just a second Ethan was somewhere else. Smoke and fire and screaming, the weight of another person in his arms, blood running down his sleeve. He shook his head and stepped onto the train. 30 minutes later, he unlocked the door to his apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. Mrs. Chen was on the couch watching a cooking show with the volume low. She did math first, Mrs. Chen said, gathering her things. Then she started reading about ecosystems, and next thing I know, she's out. Left her book open on the table. Ethan handed her $60 in cash. Thanks for staying late. That girl works too hard. Mrs. Chen shook her head. Just like her father. After she left, Ethan locked the door and engaged both deadbolts. He checked the window locks and made sure the fire escape access was secure. Then he moved quietly into Sophie's room. She was sprawled across her bed, still wearing her school clothes, her science textbook open beside her pillow. Dark hair fanned across her face. She looked so much like her mother sometimes that it hurt. Ethan carefully moved the textbook and pulled a blanket over her. Sophie stirred but didn't wake. Sleep tight, kiddo, he whispered. Back in the kitchen, Ethan made himself a sandwich he didn't really want and sat at the small table. Through the window, he could see the lights of Manhattan glowing in the distance. Somewhere in those towers, Victoria Hale was probably still working, still building her empire, still trying to remember where she'd seen his face before. He pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted browser, typing a familiar address. The dark web forum took a moment to load. No new messages, no alerts, no signs that anyone was looking for him. Ethan closed the browser and deleted his search history, even though he knew it didn't matter. If they ever found him, it wouldn't be through sloppy digital footprints. It would be because someone recognized his face. The next morning arrived too early. Sophie bounced into the kitchen at 6:30, already dressed for school and carrying her backpack like it weighed nothing. I figured out the volcano, she announced, dropping the bag on the floor. We need to make it look realistic, so I was thinking we could use paper mache over a plastic bottle and then paint it to look like real rock formations. Ethan poured cereal into 2 bowls. Sounds ambitious. Mrs. Patterson says ambitious is good. Sophie climbed onto her chair. She says people who aren't ambitious never accomplish anything important. Mrs. Patterson sounds intense. She is. Sophie grinned. I like her. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of morning routines. Ethan had been raising Sophie alone since she was 2 years old, and they developed their own rhythm. No chaos, no drama, just the two of them figuring it out day by day. You got home late last night, Sophie said between bites of cereal. Equipment failure at work. Had to fix it. Do you like your job? The question caught Ethan off guard. Sophie usually didn't ask about his work. It was boring adult stuff beneath her notice. It's fine, he said carefully. Pays the bills. Why? Sophie shrugged. Jenny's dad is a lawyer and he's always talking about his cases. And Marcus's mom runs a restaurant and she brings home fancy desserts. Your job just seems kind of quiet. Quiet's not bad. I guess. Sophie finished her cereal. But don't you want to do something more exciting? Ethan thought about Victoria Hale's eyes in the elevator. The flash of recognition, the danger of being noticed. Exciting is overrated, he said. They walked to Sophie's school together, the morning sun cutting through the gaps between buildings. Other parents clustered near the entrance, chatting and laughing. Ethan stayed on the periphery like always, exchanging brief nods but avoiding real conversation. "See you at 3, Sophie said, already running toward her friends. Ethan watched until she disappeared inside, then headed for the subway. His shift didn't start until noon, but he had errands to run. The hardware store on Flatbush Avenue for volcano supplies. The grocery store for basics. Isham. Maybe stop by the library to return Sophie's books. Normal dad stuff. Normal life. The subway platform was crowded with morning commuters. Ethan found a spot against the wall and waited for the Manhattan-bound train. Around him, people stared at their phones or read newspapers or simply stared into space with the glazed expression of those resigned to another day of work. Nobody looked at him. Nobody noticed him. Exactly how he wanted it. But as the train pulled into the station, Ethan felt the familiar prickle of awareness at the back of his neck. The instinct that had kept him alive through situations that should have killed him. Someone was watching. He scanned the platform casually, not turning his head, just letting his eyes drift across the crowd. Business suits and construction workers and students. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. The feeling persisted. Ethan stepped onto the train and positioned himself near the door where he could see the entire car. The doors closed and the subway lurched into motion. Still nothing. Maybe he was being paranoid. 12 years of hiding could do that to a person. Make them see threats in every shadow. The train emerged from the tunnel into daylight as it crossed the Manhattan Bridge. Ethan stared out at the East River below, the water gray and choppy under morning clouds. 12 years since that night. He'd been 20 years old, fresh out of a training program that officially didn't exist. The government had recruited him during his second year of college, spotting something in his psychological profile that suggested he could do the kind of work that required abandoning normal moral boundaries. They'd been right. For 3 years, Ethan had operated in places that didn't appear on maps, doing things that would never appear in official records. Extraction missions, asset recovery, targeted eliminations when necessary. He'd been good at it, disturbingly good. Then came the operation in Caracas that went wrong. His team betrayed. His commander revealed as a traitor selling intelligence to foreign governments. Everyone dead except Ethan, who'd managed to escape with nothing but the clothes on his back and a bullet wound in his shoulder. He disappeared into New York City with a new name and a determination to never use his training again. But 3 months later, he'd been on the subway when the electrical fire started. Smoke filling the tunnel. People screaming and pushing toward exits. The ceiling starting to collapse. And there was this woman, maybe 23 years old, trapped under debris with terror in her eyes. Ethan hadn't thought. He'd just moved, pulled her free, carried her through smoke and fire while the tunnel came apart around them. His arm bleeding from shrapnel. Her weight, nothing compared to the people he'd carried before. He'd gotten her to safety and then disappeared into the chaos before emergency services arrived. Victoria Hale. He hadn't known her name then. Hadn't known anything about her except that she needed help and he could provide it. Only later, when her face started appearing in business magazines as the CEO of a revolutionary tech startup, did Ethan realize what he'd done. Saved someone important, someone who would remember, someone who might try to find him. The subway pulled into the station and Ethan stepped onto the platform, pushing the memories away. The past was supposed to stay buried. That was the deal he had made with himself when Sophie was born. Leave the old life behind. Build something clean and simple and safe. But standing in the hardware store 20 minutes later, examining bottles of white vinegar for Sophie's volcano project, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Victoria Hale had seen him, really seen him, and in his experience, once you were seen, it was only a matter of time before you were found. Victoria Hale stood in her office on the 63rd floor of Hale Dynamics, staring at the security footage on her tablet. The video showed the elevator interior from last night. Herself, phone pressed to her ear, and the maintenance worker standing against the wall with his toolbox. She'd watched it 7 times already. There was something about his face, the scar, the way he held himself with perfect stillness, like a person who'd learned to occupy space without disturbing it. Ms. Hale, Bourser Motdigain. Victoria looked up to find her assistant, David, standing in the doorway with an expression of carefully maintained patience. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, he said. Cancel it. David's eyebrows rose. The board meeting? Reschedule, something came up. Should I tell them what? Victoria looked back at the tablet. The maintenance worker's face was partially shadowed, but she could see enough. The strong jaw, the careful eyes, the scar. Tell them I'm conducting an internal review, she said. After David left, Victoria pulled up the company's employment database. She typed in the name from his badge, Ethan Cole, Maintenance Level 2, employed March 2023. Previous employment, various contract positions. References. Standard clearance, background, clean. The file was almost aggressively normal, no red flags, no gaps, nothing that would draw attention, which was exactly what made Victoria suspicious. She'd built her company by trusting her instincts, and right now every instinct was screaming that something about Ethan Cole didn't add up. Victoria opened a locked drawer in her desk and pulled out a folder she hadn't looked at in months. Inside were photos, reports, and investigative summaries spanning 12 years. The subway fire, her rescue, the mysterious man who'd disappeared. She'd spent millions trying to find him, hired the best investigators in the country, recovered security footage from that night, though most of it was corrupted by smoke and fire damage. But there was one image, blurry and partially obscured. A man carrying her through smoke, his face turned away from the camera, blood on his arm. Victoria held the photo next to the security footage of Ethan Cole. The build was similar. The height matched. But the photo was 12 years old and so degraded that she couldn't be certain. Still, something in her gut insisted she was right. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in over a year. Marcus Chen Investigations. Marcus, it's Victoria Hale. I need you to look into someone. After last time, I told you I was done with that search, Marcus said. You spent $20 million and we found nothing. The guy's a ghost. Choops. Bishimaid. This is different. I need a background check, deep but discreet. I'll send you the details. Who is it? Victoria looked at Ethan Cole's employee photo. His eyes seemed to stare right through the camera, seeing something beyond the lens. Someone who might be hiding in plain sight, she said. Ethan knew something was wrong the moment he arrived for his shift. Gary, the evening supervisor, was waiting near the maintenance office with an expression that mixed concern and confusion. Cole, we need to talk. Ethan set down his toolbox. What's up? Well, say some. HR wants your updated background information, full employment history, previous addresses, the whole thing. Gary handed him a form. They said it's just routine compliance stuff, but they specifically asked for yours. Nobody else on the team got flagged. Ethan took the form, scanning the questions. Standard information, nothing unusual, except it wasn't routine. It was targeted. When do they need it? End of week. Gary shrugged. Probably just some audit thing. You know how corporate gets. Ethan nodded and folded the form into his pocket. I'll take care of it. But as he headed down to the sub-basement to check on the HVAC system, his mind was already racing through contingency plans. He had documentation that would satisfy a normal background check. False but solid. Good enough to pass standard screening. But if someone was digging deeper, looking specifically at him, the carefully constructed story of Ethan Cole would start showing cracks. He'd been in this situation before, back when Sophie was 4 and he'd been working construction in Queens. Someone had gotten too curious about his past, started asking questions. Ethan had quit the job and moved to a different neighborhood before they could dig too deep. But this was different. This was a good job, steady pay, benefits, walking distance from Sophie's school. He couldn't just disappear again. Sophie deserved stability. Ethan reached the sub-basement and began his inspection of the heating system, his hands going through familiar motions while his brain worked through options. Maybe it really was just routine. Maybe HR was updating files across the company, and he was reading too much into it. Or maybe Victoria Hale had recognized him and was quietly investigating. The thought made his chest tight. He'd spent 12 years building a wall between his past and present. 12 years making sure that the man who'd carried Victoria Hale from that burning tunnel would never be connected to the maintenance worker raising a daughter in Brooklyn. If that wall came down, everything came down with it. because the people who'd betrayed him 12 years ago were still out there, still powerful, still connected to networks that could make problems disappear. And anyone close to Ethan became a problem. His phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Finished the math homework. Started the volcano sketch. It's going to be epic. Ethan smiled despite the fear coiling in his stomach. Can't wait to see it. Whatever happened, he'd protect Sophie. That was the only thing that mattered. Even if it meant running again. Even if it meant disappearing from the one place that had finally started to feel like home. 3 days passed before Marcus Chen sent his preliminary report. Victoria sat in her office after midnight, the city glowing beneath her windows like scattered diamonds on black velvet. She'd sent her security team home hours ago. Some conversations required absolute privacy. The email notification appeared on her screen. She opened the encrypted file and began reading. Subject: Ethan Cole. Initial findings. Employment history prior to 2021 shows inconsistencies. Social security number valid, but shows minimal activity before that date. College records exist, but are vague on specifics. No military service despite profiles suggesting physical training consistent with armed forces background. Previous addresses check out, but neighbors from those locations have no recollection of him. Credit history is clean but shallow. This is a constructed identity, Ms. Hale. Professional grade. Whoever Ethan Cole is, he's not who his paperwork says he is. Victoria read the report twice, then closed her laptop. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and pressed her palm against the cold glass. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Ethan Cole was probably asleep in whatever small apartment he could afford on a maintenance worker's salary. Maybe he had family. Maybe he was alone. Maybe he was the man who'd saved her life and then vanished like smoke. Her phone rang. Marcus. "You read it?" he asked. "I did. Want me to keep digging?" Victoria watched her reflection in the window. At 35, she'd built an empire by making hard decisions quickly, by trusting her instincts even when they contradicted logic. How deep can you go without alerting him? Not much further, Marcus admitted. If he's running from something, he's got tripwires set up. The kind of background I'm describing doesn't happen by accident. Someone with serious resources helped him disappear. Or he has serious skills himself. That too. Marcus paused. You really think this maintenance guy is your subway rescuer? Victoria touched the scar on her shoulder, hidden beneath her silk blouse. The burn had healed years ago, but she still felt it sometimes, especially on cold nights when the memory came back sharp and clear. I don't know, she said quietly, but I need to find out. Be careful, Victoria. People who build new identities this solid usually have good reasons, and those reasons tend to involve danger. After hanging up, Victoria pulled up the building's security system. She had access to every camera, every corridor, every shadow in Hale Dynamics. She found Ethan on the basement level, repairing a water main leak at 1 a.m. The camera angle was poor, but she could see him working alone, his movements efficient and practiced. He wore the same gray uniform, the same unremarkable appearance designed to blend into walls and hallways. But Victoria saw something else now. The way he positioned himself with clear sightlines to all exits. The way his head lifted slightly every few minutes, listening. The coiled readiness in his posture even while doing mundane work. This was a man who expected trouble. Victoria made a decision that would change everything. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the elevator. The basement was colder than the upper floors, the air heavy with the smell of concrete and industrial cleaning supplies. Victoria's heels echoed through the corridor as she walked toward the maintenance area. Ethan was exactly where the camera showed him, crouched beside an exposed pipe with a wrench in his hand. He froze when he heard her footsteps. Mr. Cole, Victoria said. He stood slowly, setting down the wrench. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness behind him. Ms. Hale, his voice was carefully neutral. Is there a problem? That depends. Victoria stepped closer. How long have you been working here? 3 years, ma'am. That's what your file says. She watched his face. But I think we both know your file is incomplete. Ethan's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw his weight shift almost imperceptibly. Ready to move, ready to run. I don't understand, he said. 12 years ago, there was a subway fire in Manhattan. The tunnel collapsed. Dozens of people died. Victoria's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. I was there. Someone pulled me out. A man I never got to thank. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. That must have been terrifying, Ethan said finally. But I'm not sure what it has to do with me. You have a scar on your jaw, burns on your left forearm that you keep covered. And when you move like someone with tactical training. Victoria took another step forward. I've spent millions looking for the man who saved me, and I think I've been paying his salary for 3 years. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a moment, Victoria thought he might actually tell her the truth. Instead, he picked up his wrench and turned back to the pipe. You're mistaken, he said. I'm just a maintenance worker. Nothing special. Then you won't mind if I continue investigating your background. That got his attention. He turned back to face her. Why? The word came out harder than he probably intended. Why does it matter who pulled you out of that tunnel? It was 12 years ago. You survived. You built a successful company. Why can't you just let it go? Because I owe him everything, Victoria said simply. And because anyone who risks their life for a stranger and then disappears has a story worth knowing. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. In the harsh fluorescent light, his eyes looked older than 32, tired in a way that had nothing to do with late-night repair work. Some stories are better left alone, he said quietly. Is that a threat? It's advice. Ethan grabbed his toolbox. Whatever you think you're looking for, you won't find it. And even if you did, it wouldn't be worth what it costs. He walked past her toward the corridor, moving with that same controlled precision she was starting to recognize. I'm not afraid of the truth, Victoria called after him. Ethan stopped but didn't turn around. Maybe you should be, he said. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the maze of basement corridors. Victoria stood alone in the cold fluorescent light, listening to water drip in the darkness. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus. I need everything, she said when he answered. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. Find out who Ethan Cole really is. The next morning, Ethan called in sick for the first time in 3 years. He sat in his apartment while Sophie was at school, staring at the go bag he kept hidden in the back of his closet. Fake passports, cash, prepaid phones, everything he needed to disappear within an hour. He could take Sophie out of school at lunch, be on a bus to Philadelphia before anyone noticed. From there, scatter west. New city, new names, new life. Again. His phone buzzed with a text from Gary. Hope you feel better. Take tomorrow too if you need it. Ethan typed a response, then deleted it, then typed another and deleted that too. The apartment felt smaller than usual. 8 years of memories packed into 400 square feet. Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator. Her science project spread across the kitchen table. The scratches on the wall from when she'd tried to measure how tall she was growing. Could he really tear her away from all this because he was afraid? Another text appeared. This one from Mrs. Patterson, Sophie's teacher. Sophie mentioned you might help chaperone the field trip next month. We'd love to have you. Field trip, next month. Normal parent stuff that required staying in one place. Ethan set down his phone and walked to the window. Brooklyn stretched out below him in its familiar chaos. He'd lived here longer than anywhere since leaving the government. Sophie had friends, a good school, stability, everything he'd never had growing up. His phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan's hand moved toward the go bag, old instincts firing. Unknown calls were rarely innocent. He answered but didn't speak. Mr. Cole? A man's voice, professional, cautious. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm a private investigator working for Victoria Hale. I think we should talk. Ethan hung up immediately and powered down the phone. His heart hammered in his chest. They were moving faster than he'd expected. Victoria wasn't just curious, she'd hired professionals. The smart play was to run. Right now, before they dug deep enough to find the real buried truth. But as Ethan stared at Sophie's volcano project on the table, half-finished and covered in bright paint, something in him refused to move. He was tired of running, tired of building lives only to burn them down when danger got too close. Maybe it was time to try something different, even if it was probably stupid. Victoria spent the morning in back-to-back meetings, her mind only half present while lawyers discussed merger terms and analysts presented quarterly projections. Her phone buzzed during a presentation about overseas expansion. Marcus Chen. He hung up on me. This guy's spooked. If you push harder, he'll run. Victoria typed back, "What do you recommend?" "Back off. Let him think the heat's fading. Meanwhile, I'll work the background quietly." "But Victoria, I'm serious about the danger angle. His profile suggests someone who's been trained to handle threats. If he feels cornered, things could get complicated." Victoria set down her phone and tried to focus on the presentation. Charts and graphs showing projected growth in Asian markets. Important information that would normally command her full attention. But all she could think about was Ethan Cole's face in the basement, the weariness in his eyes, the resignation in his voice. Some stories are better left alone. What had he been running from all these years? The meeting finally ended and Victoria returned to her office. David was waiting with her afternoon schedule, but she waved him off. "Clear everything after 3, she said. "Ms. Hale, you have the investor presentation at 4. Reschedule it." David's professionally neutral expression cracked slightly. "They flew in from Singapore." "Then give them a tour of the facility and my apologies. Something urgent came up." After David left, looking wounded, Victoria pulled up the building schematics on her computer. She studied the layout of the basement levels, the maintenance corridors, the service areas where Ethan worked. If she wanted answers, she'd have to try a different approach. Something less confrontational, more human. Her intercom buzzed. David's voice came through with careful formality. "Miss Hale, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but says it's important." "A Mr. Ethan Cole?" Victoria's breath caught. "Send him in." She stood up, smoothing her jacket, her pulse quickening. The door opened and Ethan walked in, still wearing his maintenance uniform. He looked like he hadn't slept. His hair was slightly disheveled and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Ms. Hale," he said, "please sit." Victoria gestured to the chairs facing her desk. Ethan remained standing. "This won't take long." "All right." He took a breath, and Victoria could see him choosing his words carefully. "I need you to stop investigating me," he said. "Not because I'm hiding something criminal, not because I'm dangerous, but because there are people in this world who would be very interested to know where I am. And if you keep digging, you're going to send up signals that I've spent 12 years trying to avoid." Victoria studied him. "What people?" "Ooh. The kind who don't appear in databases or official records, the kind who make problems disappear." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not a threat to you or this company. I just want to live a quiet life and raise my daughter in peace." "You have a daughter?" Something flickered across Ethan's face, a softness that hadn't been there before. "Sophie. She's 8, and she's the reason I can't afford to be found." Victoria felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just about him. There was a child involved. "Tell me about the subway fire," she said gently. "Ms. Hale, please, just that. You can keep everything else private, but I need to know if you're the man who saved me." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the city. "I was passing through the tunnel when the fire started," he said finally. "People were panicking, pushing, screaming. I saw you trapped under debris and I pulled you out. That's all, Asuo." "That's all?" Victoria moved to stand beside him. "You carried me through a collapsing tunnel with flames everywhere. You were bleeding. I remember your blood on my jacket. I was in the area. I helped. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't. You did." Victoria turned to face him. "And then you disappeared. Why?" Ethan's jaw worked like he was fighting some internal battle. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I was someone else back then. Someone dangerous. And getting close to me would have put you at risk." He looked at her directly. "It still does. Let me help you." "You can't. I have resources, lawyers, security. Whatever you're running from, we can—" "You don't understand." Ethan's voice hardened. "The people I'm hiding from don't care about lawyers or security. They're ghosts. And if they find me, everyone near me becomes collateral damage. So please, Ms. Hale, for your own safety and mine, stop digging." He started toward the door. "What if I can't?" Victoria said. Ethan paused with his hand on the doorknob. "Then I'll disappear," he said. "And this time, you won't find me." He left without another word. Victoria stood alone in her office, her mind racing. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "Pull back," she said. "Stop the investigation." "You're sure?" Victoria looked at the empty doorway where Ethan had stood. No, she said honestly, but he has a daughter, and I'm not going to put a child at risk because I need closure. She ended the call and sat down at her desk, trying to focus on work, but her hands were shaking. Ethan picked up Sophie from school at 3, earlier than usual. "You're never here this early," Sophie said, surprised and pleased. "Did you get off work?" "Took the afternoon off," Ethan said. "Thought we could work on your volcano together." They walked home through Brooklyn's afternoon chaos, Sophie chattering about her day. Math test went well. Recess was fun. Jenny got in trouble for talking during reading time. Normal kid stuff. Normal life. Everything Ethan was terrified of losing. Back at the apartment, they spread newspaper across the kitchen table and started building the papier-mâché mountain. Sophie took the project very seriously, carefully layering strips of glue-soaked paper over the plastic bottle frame. "Dad?" she said after a while. "Yeah?" "Is everything okay?" Ethan looked up from the newspaper he was tearing into strips. "Why do you ask? You seem worried, like something's bothering you." 8 years old and already too perceptive. She got that from him too. "Just work stuff," Ethan said. "Nothing for you to worry about. Is someone giving you trouble?" "No, kiddo, it's fine." Sophie studied him with those dark eyes that saw too much. "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? If we had to move again or something?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sophie had been 4 the last time they'd relocated suddenly. She barely remembered it, or so he'd thought. "What do you remember about moving?" he asked carefully. Sophie shrugged and went back to her papier-mâché work. "Not much. Just that one day you said we were going on an adventure and we left really fast. You seemed scared." "I wasn't scared. You were." Sophie smoothed a paper strip over the bottle. "It's okay. Dad, I was scared too. But then we came here and it got better." Mate. Ethan set down his newspaper strips and pulled Sophie into a hug. She smelled like school chalk and strawberry shampoo. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we don't have to move again," he said into her hair. "Promise?" Ethan thought about Victoria Hale, about the investigators digging into his past, about the enemies who might still be looking for him. "I promise I'll try," he said. It was the most honest thing he could offer. That night, after Sophie fell asleep with her book open beside her pillow again, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. He opened the encrypted browser and navigated to a dark web forum he hadn't visited in years. A place where people with certain skills traded information quietly. He typed a simple query. "Anyone tracking former Unit 17 operatives?" Unit 17 was the designation for his old team, the covert extraction group that had been disbanded after the Caracas disaster. Officially, it had never existed. Unofficially, most of its members were dead. Ethan watched the screen, waiting. 3 minutes passed. Then a response appeared. "Who's asking?" Ethan typed. "Someone who needs to know if the past is staying buried." Another pause. Longer this time. "Depends on the operative. Some names are still hot. Others went cold years ago. Which one are you?" Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Identifying himself, even obliquely, was dangerous. But so was staying ignorant. He typed, "Brooklyn." It was his old call sign, the designation he'd used during operations. The response came faster this time. "You should be dead." "Not yet." "Am I still hot?" "Not officially. But there's been activity. Someone's been asking questions about Caracas. About who survived." Ethan's blood went cold. "Who's asking?" "Don't know. Professional, though. Government contractor, maybe." "Started about 2 months ago. 2 months. Right around when he would have first appeared on Victoria's radar through her ongoing search for her rescuer. Was it coincidence? Or had her investigation triggered something?" Ethan typed, "How much danger?" "Hard to say. Could be routine audit. Could be someone cleaning up loose ends. You've been invisible for 12 years. If I were you, I'd stay that way." Ethan closed the browser and deleted all traces of the conversation. His phone buzzed. A text from Gary. "Feeling better? Got a busted AC unit on floor 28 if you're up for it tomorrow. Normal work. Normal life. Normal problems that could be fixed with tools and technical knowledge." Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'll be there. because running would solve nothing. Not anymore. If someone was coming for him, they'd find him eventually whether he was in Brooklyn or Bangkok. At least here, he had something worth protecting. Victoria couldn't sleep. She lay in her penthouse bedroom at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed below. She kept seeing Ethan's face, the exhaustion, the fear barely hidden beneath careful control, and his daughter, Sophie, 8 years old. Victoria had spent 12 years obsessed with finding the man who'd saved her, building it into a quest, a mission, proof that she was someone who paid her debts and honored those who'd sacrificed for her. But she'd never considered that finding him might put others at risk. She got out of bed and walked to her living room, pouring herself a glass of wine she didn't really want. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter. She picked it up and opened her contacts, scrolling to Marcus Chen's number. Then she set it down again. She'd told him to pull back, to stop investigating. But that was easier said than done. Marcus was good at his job. He'd already started digging, already uncovered information about Ethan's constructed identity. And if Marcus could find those breadcrumbs, others could too. Victoria thought about Ethan's words. The people I'm hiding from don't care about lawyers or security. What kind of life had he lived before that subway fire? What had he been running from all these years? Her phone rang, making her jump. Marcus. "It's 2 in the morning, Victoria said, answering. "I know, but you need to hear this." Marcus sounded tense. "I did what you asked. Pulled back from actively investigating Cole, but I set up some passive monitoring. Basic stuff. Watching for any unusual activity around his digital footprint. And someone else is looking for him, or looking for someone like him. I caught traces of queries running through government contractor databases. Very sophisticated, very quiet, but they're searching for former operatives who went dark around 12 years ago." Victoria's hand tightened on her phone. Could be coincidence. Could be. But Victoria, this search started ramping up around the same time you began investigating Cole. It's possible your inquiries triggered something, sent up a flag somewhere. But then I led them right to him. We don't know that for sure, but if Cole's been hiding from government contractors for 12 years, and suddenly there's renewed interest in finding people with his profile. Marcus let the implication hang. Victoria set down her wine glass before she dropped it. "What do I do?" she asked. "Honestly, nothing. Let it fade. Hopefully it's just routine cleanup and they'll move on. The worst thing you could do is draw more attention to him. Or I could warn him. Bad idea. You barely know this guy. He could be dangerous. He has an 8-year-old daughter, Marcus. Lots of dangerous people have kids. It doesn't make them safe." Victoria ended the call and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the sleeping city. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Ethan Cole was probably awake too. Probably running through the same calculations. Probably deciding whether to run. And it was her fault. Her obsession with finding her rescuer. Her need for closure. Her inability to let the past rest. She'd put a target on him, and potentially on his daughter. The next morning, Victoria did something she hadn't done in years. She left her security detail behind and took the subway to Brooklyn. It was rush hour, the train packed with commuters. Victoria stood pressed between a man reading the newspaper and a woman listening to music, feeling more anonymous than she had in years. No one recognized her here. No one cared that she was worth billions or ran a tech empire. She was just another person trying to get somewhere. The train emerged from the tunnel into daylight, and Victoria stared out at the neighborhoods passing by. Older buildings with fire escapes and laundry hanging from windows. Corner stores and small restaurants. The parts of New York that existed outside Manhattan's gleaming towers. This was Ethan's world. She got off at his stop, having memorized his address from his employee file. The morning was cold and bright. Victoria pulled her coat tighter and walked through streets that smelled like coffee and exhaust and fresh bread from a corner bakery. She found his building easily, a worn brick structure that had probably been nice 50 years ago, the kind of place where working people lived, where rent was manageable but nothing was new or fancy. Victoria stood on the sidewalk, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here? What would she even say? Before she could decide, the building's front door opened and Sophie emerged, wearing a purple backpack and talking animatedly with another girl her age. Victoria's breath caught. Sophie looked like her father, Same dark hair, same strong features, but there was something lighter about her, less burdened. Ethan followed a moment later, his hand resting protectively on Sophie's shoulder. He saw Victoria immediately. His entire body went rigid. Sophie and her friend kept walking, oblivious. But Ethan stopped on the steps, his eyes locked on Victoria with an expression that mixed anger and fear. Victoria started to approach. Ethan held up one hand, stopping her. He said something to Sophie, who nodded and continued walking with her friend toward the next corner. Then Ethan crossed the street toward Victoria, his movements controlled but his face showing cracks in its usual careful mask. "What are you doing here, say?" His voice was low and hard. "I needed to see you. Stay away from my daughter. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to warn you." Victoria glanced around, suddenly aware of how exposed they were on the street. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "We're done talking. Sep." "Someone's looking for you," Victoria said urgently. "My investigator found traces of an active search. Government contractors. They're looking for former operatives who disappeared around 12 years ago." Ethan's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw his shoulders tense. "When did this start?" he asked. "Around the same time I started investigating you." Victoria met his eyes. "I think I triggered something. I'm sorry." Ethan looked down the street where Sophie had disappeared around the corner. When he looked back at Victoria, something in his face had shifted. The careful control was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "You need to leave," he said. "Right now. Don't come back here. Don't try to contact me. Forget you ever found me. Let me help. I have resources." "Your resources are what caused this problem." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Do you understand what you've done? I've kept Sophie safe for 8 years. 8 years of being invisible, of building a normal life. And in 2 weeks you've destroyed it. Then let me fix it." "You can't fix this." Ethan's eyes were hard. "The people looking for me don't stop. They don't negotiate. And they sure as hell don't care about a billionaire CEO trying to play hero. I'm not playing anything. I owe you my life. Then repay me by disappearing. Go back to your tower. Forget about the maintenance worker. Forget about the subway fire. Just forget." He turned and walked away, following the path his daughter had taken. Victoria stood alone on the Brooklyn street, watching him go. Around her, the neighborhood went about its morning. People heading to work. Kids walking to school. Normal life happening everywhere. But nothing about this was normal anymore. She'd found the man who saved her life. And in doing so, she might have just condemned him to death. Victoria didn't go back to Manhattan. She walked through Brooklyn for 2 hours, her phone buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from David about missed meetings and canceled appointments. She ignored all of them. The neighborhood where Ethan lived was a mix of old and new. Corner bodegas next to organic coffee shops. Aging brownstones beside modern apartment complexes. People lived here. Real people with ordinary problems and normal lives. The kind of life Ethan had built for Sophie. The kind of life Victoria had just destroyed. She found herself standing outside Sophie's school around lunchtime. Parents and delivery workers moved past her on the sidewalk. Nobody gave her a second glance in her simple coat and jeans. Through the chain-link fence, she could see children playing in the yard, running and screaming and laughing with the careless energy of people who didn't know the world could be dangerous. Sophie was easy to spot. Dark hair in a ponytail, purple backpack discarded by the basketball court. She was playing some kind of tag game with 3 other girls, her face bright with joy. Victoria watched her laugh at something one of her friends said. This was what Ethan was protecting, not himself. This. Her phone rang. Marcus Chen. Victoria answered but kept watching Sophie through the fence. "Where are you?" Marcus asked. "Your office said you disappeared this morning." "Brooklyn. Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. I warned him. About the search." Marcus swore quietly. "Victoria, that was incredibly stupid. If there's active surveillance on Cole, you just connected yourself directly to him. Anyone monitoring his contacts now has you flagged as a person of interest." "Good." "Good? What the hell does that mean?" Victoria turned away from the school and started walking back toward the subway. "It means if they're looking for him, they'll find me first. And unlike Ethan, I have lawyers and security and resources. I can handle pressure. He can't, not with a daughter to protect." "So your plan is to make yourself a target?" My plan is to draw attention away from an 8-year-old child. That's not a plan. That's suicide. Tukakis. Victoria stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. Then help me make it a better plan. You said these are government contractors, which means someone hired them. Find out who. That kind of information is buried deep and expensive. I don't care what it costs. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You really think this maintenance guy is worth all this trouble? Victoria thought about Ethan carrying her through fire and smoke, his blood on her jacket, the way he'd disappeared without waiting for thanks or recognition. He saved my life when he could have kept walking, she said. And he spent 12 years trying to give his daughter a normal childhood despite whatever hell he's running from. So yes, he's worth it. All right, I'll start digging. But Victoria, be careful. If Cole's past involves the kind of people who use contractors to hunt down former operatives, this could get messy. After hanging up, Victoria took the subway back to Manhattan. The train was less crowded now, the morning rush over. She sat by the window and watched Brooklyn disappear into tunnels and darkness. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. Hello? Ms. Hale. Ethan's voice was tight. We need to talk. Not on the phone. Tonight. There's a park near the Brooklyn Bridge. Meet me there at 8. I'll be there. Come alone. And make sure you're not followed. He hung up before she could respond. Victoria stared at her phone, her pulse quickening. Whatever was happening, it was accelerating faster than she'd anticipated. Back at her office, David nearly collapsed with relief when she walked through the door. Where have you been? He demanded, his professional composure cracking. The Singapore investors left. The board called an emergency meeting, and there are 17 messages from the CFO about the quarterly projections. Reschedule Singapore. Tell the board I'll call them tomorrow. And tell the CFO the projections are fine. Victoria walked past him toward her private office. Clear my schedule after 7 tonight. Ms. Hale, you can't just disappear like that. This company has obligations. Victoria stopped and turned to face her assistant. David had worked for her for 6 years. He was efficient, loyal, and usually unflappable. Right now he looked genuinely worried. David, she said more gently, I'm sorry. Something important came up. Something personal. It won't happen again. Personal? David's eyebrows rose. You don't do personal. Maybe it's time I started. She spent the rest of the afternoon forcing herself to focus on work. Contract reviews, strategic planning, a video conference with their European division about expansion into emerging markets. Normal CEO responsibilities that suddenly felt trivial compared to the reality that somewhere in Brooklyn, Ethan Cole was probably making plans to run. At 7:30, Victoria changed out of her business suit into jeans and a dark jacket. She told her security team she was going home and would drive herself. They protested, but she overruled them. The park near the Brooklyn Bridge was small and poorly lit. Trees lined gravel paths and a few benches faced the water. At 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night in late autumn, it was almost deserted. Victoria found Ethan sitting on a bench facing the bridge, his hands in his pockets and his shoulders hunched against the cold. She sat down beside him without speaking. For a long moment, they just watched the bridge lights reflect off the dark water. I checked my contacts, Ethan said finally. People who keep track of certain things. The search for former Unit 17 operatives started exactly 2 weeks ago. Same time your investigator began asking questions about my background. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help. Ethan's voice was flat. But it does confirm what I suspected. Your investigation triggered something. Someone noticed the inquiries and started looking deeper. Then let me help you disappear. Money, new identities, whatever you need. Ethan turned to look at her. In the dim light from the bridge, his face looked carved from stone. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, he said. The people hunting me aren't motivated by money. They're motivated by fear. Fear that someone like me might talk, might expose operations that were never supposed to exist. What operations? Ethan looked back at the water. The kind where innocent people die and nobody asks questions. Where governments deny involvement and evidence disappears. He paused. I was part of that. For 3 years. And then I tried to stop it. Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. What happened? My unit was sent to Caracas to extract an asset. Someone who had information about cartel operations that tied back to certain U.S. officials. We were supposed to bring him back alive for debriefing. Ethan's hands clenched in his pockets. Instead, our commander killed him, made it look like the cartels got to him first. When I figured out what happened, I realized our entire unit was being used to eliminate loose ends instead of gathering intelligence. You tried to expose it, Isaimis. You tried. I tried to get evidence to the right people. Instead, my commander found out, ordered the team to eliminate me during our next operation. I got lucky, survived, went underground. Victoria processed this. And your commander? Botsars. Disappeared into the bureaucracy, probably still operating somewhere under a different name and designation. These networks protect their own. Ethan stood up and walked to the railing overlooking the water. 3 months after Caracas, I was on that subway when the fire started. I'd been living on the streets, too paranoid to stay anywhere permanent. When I saw you trapped, it was the first time in months I'd done something that felt human, something that wasn't about survival or hiding. So you saved me and then disappeared again. I couldn't risk staying. Anyone investigating the fire might have looked too closely at the rescuer, so I vanished. Spent 2 more years moving around before Sophie was born. Victoria joined him at the railing. Her mother, Ish, died during childbirth. Complications. Ethan's voice went rough. She knew about my past, knew I was hiding, and she still chose to be with me. After she died, I promised myself Sophie would have something better, a real life, safety. And you kept that promise for 8 years, until you found me. The accusation hung between them. Victoria wanted to defend herself, to explain that she'd only been trying to find someone to thank, to pay back a debt. But the truth was simpler and more damning. She'd been selfish, obsessed with her own need for closure without considering what finding him might cost. Tell me how to fix this, she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. You can't. The damage is done. Within a week, maybe 2, they'll trace the connection between your investigator's queries and my current identity. Once that happens, I have to run, take Sophie out of school, leave everything behind, again. What if you didn't run? Then we die. Simple as that. Victoria turned to face him directly. What if there was another option? What if instead of running or dying, you fought back? With what? I'm one person. They're an entire network with unlimited resources and government backing. But I have resources too, legal teams, private security, media connections. Victoria's mind was racing now, assembling pieces of a plan. If we could expose what happened in Caracas, prove your commander was corrupt, it would give you leverage. Insurance. Evidence from 12 years ago? It's long gone. Maybe. Or maybe it's buried somewhere. People like your commander keep insurance policies too. Proof they can use to protect themselves if things go wrong. Ethan studied her face. You're serious? Completely. I built a company worth $40 billion by refusing to accept that some problems can't be solved. This is just another problem. This isn't a business negotiation, Ms. Hale. Victoria. And I know it's not business. It's survival. For you and Sophie. And I can help if you let me. Ethan was quiet for a long time, his eyes searching hers. Why? He asked finally. Why do you care this much about someone you don't even know? Victoria thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated. Part of it was the debt she felt from the subway fire. Part of it was admiration for someone who'd sacrificed everything to give his daughter a better life. And part of it, if she was being honest, was something deeper. A connection she didn't fully understand but couldn't ignore. Because 12 years ago you made a choice, she said. You were homeless and hiding and trying to survive, and you still stopped to save a stranger. That kind of person deserves better than spending their life running. Ethan looked out at the water again. The bridge lights cast moving shadows across his face. If we do this, it gets dangerous, he said. Not just for me, for you too. These people don't make threats, they act. I understand. And Sophie, if this goes wrong, she becomes a target. I can't risk that. Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong. Victoria pulled out her phone. I have a secure property upstate, private, heavily guarded. Sophie could stay there while we work, protected. She'd be terrified, away from school, from her friends. She'd be alive, and once we exposed the truth, she could have her life back. A real one, without you having to look over your shoulder every day. Ethan turned to face her, and Victoria saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of 12 years of running. How would this even work? He asked. First, we get Sophie somewhere safe, tomorrow. I'll arrange everything, then you and I start digging. Find anyone who might have information about Caracas. Your former teammates, support personnel, anyone who might have kept records. Most of them are dead. Most isn't all. There's always someone who survives, someone who knows something. Victoria felt the familiar energy that came when she was solving a problem. Meanwhile, my legal team prepares documentation. If we can build enough evidence, we go public. Force an investigation. Make you too visible to kill quietly. Going public means admitting what I did, the operations I was part of. It also means telling your side of the story, showing you tried to stop it. That takes courage. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He looked at her for a long moment, and Victoria could see him weighing options, running versus fighting, safety versus justice. Finally, he nodded. Okay, we try it your way, but the second it looks like Sophie's in danger, I take her, and we disappear. Agreed? Agreed. They shook hands, and Victoria felt the calluses on his palm. Working man's hands. But underneath, she could feel strength, the kind that came from years of discipline and training. I need to tell Sophie something, Ethan said. She's going to have questions. Tell her it's a vacation, a surprise trip while you handle some work things. Sophie's too smart for that. She'll know something's wrong. Then tell her the truth, or as much of it as you think she can handle. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the screen. She's with Mrs. Chen right now, probably doing homework and complaining about math. Normal kid stuff. Yeah. Ethan's voice went soft. For maybe the last time. Victoria touched his arm gently. We're going to fix this. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. The park was getting colder, the wind coming off the water in sharp gusts. Victoria pulled her jacket tighter. I should go, Ethan said. Need to pack some things. Talk to Sophie. My driver will pick you both up tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. The property upstate has everything she'll need. Clothes, books, whatever. And security that would make the Secret Service jealous. 6 a.m. Ethan started to walk away, then stopped. Victoria? Yes? Thank you, for trying, at least. Don't thank me yet. We haven't accomplished anything. You're right, but still. He disappeared into the darkness between the trees, and Victoria stood alone by the water. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen. She answered. Tell me you found something. Maybe. I've been digging into government contractor databases, cross-referencing searches related to former military operatives. There's a company called Sentinel Solutions that keeps popping up. Private security firm with deep government ties. They specialize in asset recovery and threat elimination. Threat elimination. Victoria felt sick. That's a nice way to say assassination. Exactly. And here's the interesting part. 2 weeks ago, Sentinel received a contract for what they're calling operational cleanup related to historical intelligence breaches. The timing matches perfectly with when your investigators started asking questions about Cole. Can you find out who hired them? I'm trying, but this is buried under about 6 layers of shell companies and classified documentation. It's going to take time. We don't have time. If they're actively hunting Ethan, we need to know who's behind it and why. I'll keep pushing, but Victoria, be careful. If Sentinel Solutions is involved, these aren't amateurs. They're professionals with government resources. After hanging up, Victoria walked slowly back toward where her car was parked. The streets of Brooklyn were quieter now, most people already home for the night. She thought about Sophie sleeping safely in her apartment, unaware that her entire world was about to change. And she thought about Ethan, who'd spent 12 years building a life on borrowed time. Tomorrow everything would shift. Either they'd find a way to fight back, or Ethan would take Sophie and disappear forever. Victoria had built an empire by making impossible things happen. Now she just had to make one more impossible thing work. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Victoria stood in her penthouse at 5:30, drinking coffee and watching the city wake up below. She'd barely slept, her mind running through contingencies and backup plans. At 5:45, her phone rang. Ethan. "We're ready," he said. His voice was tight. "But Sophie's asking questions I can't answer. Put her on." There was a pause, then a young voice came through the line, uncertain but trying to sound brave. "Hello?" "Hi, Sophie. My name is Victoria. I'm a friend of your dad's. He said we're going on a trip. To your house." "That's right. I have a place upstate where you can stay for a little while. It's really beautiful. There's a library and a game room and lots of space to explore." "Why can't we stay at our apartment?" Victoria chose her words carefully. "Your dad has some important work to do, and he needs to make sure you're somewhere safe and comfortable while he handles it. Think of it like an adventure." Dad said adventures are just his way of saying something's wrong. Smart kid. "Your dad is very honest with you," Victoria said. "And you're right. Something is a little bit complicated right now. But he's working to fix it, and I'm going to help him. In the meantime, you get to stay somewhere nice and quiet. Maybe catch up on reading or work on any projects you have. My volcano project is due next week. Then bring all your supplies. There's plenty of space to work on it." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is my dad in trouble?" "Your dad is one of the bravest people I've ever met. And right now, he's making sure you're safe. That's what matters." "Okay." Sophie's voice was small. "Can I bring my books?" "Bring whatever you want." Ethan came back on the line. The car just pulled up outside. "Good. My head of security is driving. His name is Thomas, former Marine, very capable. He'll stay with Sophie while we work. I don't like leaving her." "I know, but she'll be safer there than anywhere in the city. Trust me. I'm trusting you with everything." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't." Victoria ended the call and finished her coffee. Through the window, she could see the first light touching the tops of buildings. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Ethan was hugging his daughter goodbye and watching her climb into a car that would take her away from everything familiar. And somewhere else, people were hunting him, getting closer every day. Victoria grabbed her jacket and headed for the elevator. It was time to start hunting back. Marcus met her at a small office building in Queens 2 hours later. The space was deliberately nondescript, rented under a shell company name. No connection to Hale Dynamics or Victoria personally. "This is where we work from now," Marcus said, unlocking the door. "No digital footprint leading back to you. Cash payments only. Completely off the books." Inside, the office was sparse. A few desks, basic computers, filing cabinets. Marcus had already set up what he called their war room. One wall was covered with photos, documents, and handwritten notes connected by red string. It looked like something from a detective movie. "You watch too much television," Victoria said. "Maybe, but visualization helps. Look." Marcus pointed to the center of the web. "Ethan Cole, former Unit 17 operative, went dark 12 years ago after the Caracas incident." His finger moved to another photo. "This is Commander James Wolfe, officially retired 8 years ago. Unofficially, still consulting for various government contractors." "You think he's behind the search for Ethan?" "Can't prove it yet, but Wolfe has ties to Sentinel Solutions, and Sentinel's the company actively hunting former Unit 17 members. The connection's too convenient to ignore." Victoria studied the photo. Wolfe was maybe 50, with steel gray hair and the kind of face that revealed nothing, military bearing even in civilian clothes. "Where is he now?" "Virginia. Runs a private security consultancy out of Arlington. Very respectable, very legitimate on paper." And underneath? "Bayumembi Parkam." Still dirty, still connected, still dangerous. Marcus pulled up another document. I found financial records showing Wolf received a payment of $2 million 3 months before the Caracas operation. The payment came from a shell company later linked to cartel operations. He was paid to eliminate the asset instead of extracting him. Exactly, which means someone powerful wanted that information buried. And if Ethan can prove Wolf was corrupt, it exposes everyone in the chain above him. Victoria felt pieces clicking together. So Wolf's trying to eliminate Ethan before he can talk. That's why he hired Sentinel. That's my working theory, but we need proof. Hard evidence that connects Wolf to the search and to Sentinel's current contract. How do we get that? Marcus smiled grimly. We make Wolf come to us. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Explain. Wolf's been hunting Ethan for 12 years, quietly, carefully, never making too much noise because he can't afford attention. But now your investigator started asking questions. That scared him, made him escalate through Sentinel. Marcus tapped the photo. So we make him escalate more, force him into the open where we can document everything. How? We let Wolf find Ethan, or think he's found him. We set a trap. Victoria felt cold spread through her chest. You want to use Ethan as bait. Not Ethan. A decoy, someone who matches his profile in the right databases. We create digital breadcrumbs leading Sentinel to a fake location. When they move, we're watching, recording, gathering evidence. That's incredibly risky. Everything about this is risky, but it's the fastest way to force Wolf's hand and get proof of what he's doing. Victoria walked to the window overlooking the street below. Normal people going about normal days. Nobody down there was planning how to trap a corrupt military commander. What if it doesn't work? She asked. Then we try something else. But Victoria, time's not on our side. Sentinel's good at what they do. Eventually they'll find the real Ethan. When that happens, he and Sophie are dead. We need to move first. Victoria turned back to the wall of evidence. Photos and documents and connections drawn in red string. 12 years of secrets and lies waiting to be exposed. Set it up, she said. But we do it carefully. No unnecessary risks, and Ethan has to approve the plan. When's he coming? This afternoon, after he makes sure Sophie's settled. Marcus nodded and started making notes. We'll need someone to play the decoy. Former military, similar build to Ethan. And we'll need a location that's defensible but appears vulnerable. Somewhere Sentinel would logically target. I'll handle the location. You find the decoy. For the next 3 hours, Victoria and Marcus worked through logistics, creating false digital trails, planting information in databases Sentinel would likely monitor, building a trap that looked just real enough to draw them in. At 2 in the afternoon, Ethan arrived. He looked worse than yesterday. Eyes red from lack of sleep, his jaw tight with tension. Sophie's at the property, he said without preamble. She cried when I left. First time in years I've seen her cry like that. She's safe, Victoria said gently. Thomas is with her. He has 3 daughters of his own. He knows how to help her feel comfortable. Ethan nodded but didn't look convinced. Marcus laid out the plan, explaining how they'd use a decoy to draw Sentinel into a trap while documenting everything. Ethan listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Who's the decoy? He asked finally, still working on that, but someone with military background who can handle himself if things go wrong. I'll do it. That defeats the entire purpose, Marcus said. You're what we're trying to protect. But I'm also the only person who knows exactly how these operations work, how Sentinel thinks, how they'll approach. Ethan's voice was firm. If we're setting a trap, it needs to feel authentic. That means someone who actually knows what they're doing. Victoria shook her head. Too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way I'm in control. They argued for 20 minutes, but Ethan wouldn't budge. Finally, Victoria gave in with conditions. Heavy security backup, multiple escape routes, abort protocols if anything felt wrong. Fine, she said. But we do this smart. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Agreed. Marcus pulled up building schematics on his laptop. There's a warehouse in Red Hook that might work, partially abandoned. Lots of exits, but isolated enough that Sentinel would consider it viable for an operation. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning entry points and sight lines, communication protocols, where backup would stage. As evening fell outside the windows, Victoria felt the reality of what they were attempting settle over her. They were three people with limited resources trying to trap a professional military contractor. It was either very brave or very stupid, probably both. The warehouse in Red Hook smelled like rust and old motor oil. Ethan stood in the center of the empty floor space, his footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Broken windows let in cold November wind. Shadows pooled in corners where the overhead lights had long since burned out. It was perfect. Marcus walked the perimeter, checking sight lines. Sentinel will approach from the east. It's the only side with decent cover. We'll have cameras here, here, and here. He pointed to strategic positions. Audio recording from multiple angles. Everything admissible in court. Assuming we survive long enough to get to court, Ethan said. Victoria stood near the entrance, her arms crossed against the cold. She'd insisted on coming despite both men telling her to stay away. Now she studied the warehouse with the same analytical focus she brought to business negotiations. The backup team positions here? She asked, pointing to a loading dock on the south side. He asked. Close enough to respond but far enough to stay hidden, Marcus confirmed. 6 men, all former military, all people I trust. You what? And if Sentinel brings more than we expect? Then we abort. Ethan gets out through the north exit and we regroup. Ethan moved to one of the broken windows and looked out at the industrial wasteland surrounding the warehouse. Rusted shipping containers, abandoned equipment, empty lots that stretched toward the water. No witnesses. No civilians who might get caught in crossfire. Just the kind of place where people could disappear. When do we plant the breadcrumbs? He asked. Marcus checked his watch. Tonight. I'll seed information in 3 databases that Sentinel monitors. Make it look like someone spotted you in Red Hook. Give them a partial address that leads here. By tomorrow morning, they should have the location. And then? Then we wait. Could be hours, could be days. But they'll come. Victoria walked over to stand beside Ethan at the window. You don't have to do this. We can still find another way. There is no other way. Ethan's voice was flat. We've been through this. I know, but Sophie... Sophie's exactly why I'm doing this. Ethan turned to face her. If we run... She spends her whole life looking over her shoulder, moving every few years when things get too hot, never having real friends or a real home. I've given her 8 years of pretending to be normal. I want to give her the rest of her life actually being normal. Mom. Victoria saw the exhaustion in his eyes, not just from the past few days, but from 12 years of running, 12 years of fear and vigilance and constant calculation. Okay, she said quietly, but promise me you'll be careful. Careful is what I do best. Marcus interrupted by pulling out his laptop. I need to get started on the digital trail. Should take about 3 hours to plan everything and make it look organic. Ethan, you should get some rest. Once this starts, you won't get much sleep. I'm fine. You look like death. Go rest. Ethan wanted to argue, but knew Marcus was right. He'd barely slept in 3 days. His body was running on adrenaline and coffee and the kind of wired tension that preceded combat. Victoria drove him back to the Queen's office in her car. They didn't talk much during the drive. The city slid past outside the windows, millions of people living ordinary lives while Ethan prepared to become bait for killers. At the office, Victoria had set up a small room in the back with a cot and basic supplies. Not exactly the Ritz, she said. I've slept in worse places. Victoria lingered in the doorway. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever regret it? Saving me that night in the subway? Ethan sat down on the cot and pulled off his boots. The question surprised him. Why would I regret it? Because if you'd kept walking, none of this would be happening. You'd still be invisible. Sophie would still be in school. Your life wouldn't be falling apart. Ethan thought about that night. The smoke and fire. Victoria trapped under debris with terror in her eyes. The split-second decision to help instead of run. No, he said finally. I don't regret it. That night reminded me I was still human, still capable of doing something good. After Caracas, after everything that happened with Unit 17, I'd started thinking maybe I was just broken, just a weapon that couldn't be fixed. He looked at Victoria. Pulling you out of that tunnel proved I was wrong. Victoria's eyes were bright. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you did. Even if it's complicated now. Complicated is generous. She smiled slightly. Get some sleep. I'll wake you if anything happens. After she left, Ethan lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. His phone was on the small table beside him. He picked it up and opened his messages. There was a text from Thomas, the security chief watching Sophie. She's doing okay. Finished her homework, asked about you. I told her you'd call soon. Ethan typed back. Tell her I love her. And that everything's going to be fine, even though he had no idea if that was true. He set an alarm for 4 hours and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, interrupted by memories he'd spent years trying to bury. Caracas. The extraction that went wrong. His teammates' faces before the ambush. Commander Wolf's cold voice over the radio, ordering Ethan's execution like it was routine paperwork. The bullet that should have killed him but missed by 2 inches. Everything that came after. When Ethan finally slept, he dreamed of fire and smoke and a young woman's terrified eyes. He woke to Victoria shaking his shoulder. Marcus planted the breadcrumbs, she said. It's done. Ethan checked his watch. He'd been asleep for 3 hours. His body felt heavy and slow. Any response yet? Too soon, but Marcus is monitoring everything. The moment Sentinel accesses the databases, we'll know. Ethan got up and splashed cold water on his face from the office bathroom sink. His reflection looked rough. 3 days of stubble. Dark circles under his eyes. The scar on his jaw more prominent than usual. He looked like what he was. A man running out of time. Back in the main office, Marcus was hunched over multiple monitors, tracking data flows and access logs. Nothing yet, he said without looking up. But these things take time. Sentinel's careful. They'll verify information before they move. How long? Could be tonight, could be tomorrow. Hard to say. Victoria handed Ethan a cup of coffee. We should go over the plan again. Make sure everyone knows their role. For the next 2 hours, they reviewed every detail. Entry points, 2, communication protocols, emergency exits. What to do if things went wrong? Ethan had run operations like this before. Back when he worked for Unit 17, setting traps was part of the job. The difference was, then he'd had a full team and government resources. Now he had Marcus, Victoria, and 6 former military contractors who were good but not great. It would have to be enough. Around midnight, Marcus sat up straight. We've got activity. Ethan and Victoria crowded around the monitor. Lines of code scrolled past, tracking database access patterns. Someone just pulled the information about Red Hook, Marcus said. IP address traces back to a server farm in Virginia. Heavy encryption. Professional grade. Sentinel? Almost certainly. Marcus typed rapidly, following digital trails. They're being careful, routing through multiple proxies. But yeah, this is them. Victoria gripped the back of Marcus's chair. What now? Now we wait and see if they take the bait. So, 20 minutes later, there was more activity. Someone accessing property records for the Red Hook warehouse, checking satellite imagery, pulling traffic camera footage from nearby streets. They're doing reconnaissance, Ethan said, recognizing the pattern, building a tactical picture before they commit. How long before they move? If they're good, 12 to 24 hours. They'll want to verify the intel, plan their approach, gather resources. Marcus pulled up a feed from the security cameras they'd installed at the warehouse. The empty building sat dark and silent in the night. Cameras are live, motion sensors active. The moment anyone approaches, we'll know. Victoria checked her phone. The backup team is ready. I can have them in position within 30 minutes. Not yet, Ethan said. If we move too early, Sentinel might notice. We wait until they commit. The night dragged on slowly after that. Marcus monitored digital activity while Ethan paced the office. Victoria made phone calls to her legal team, preparing documentation they'd need once they had evidence. Around 3 in the morning, Ethan's phone buzzed. Thomas. He answered immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Sophie woke up, couldn't sleep. She's asking for you. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Put her on. There was rustling, then Sophie's small voice came through the line. Dad? Hey kiddo, you okay? I had a bad dream about the fire escape collapsing at our apartment building. You were stuck on it, and I couldn't help you. Ethan closed his eyes. Sophie had always been sensitive to his moods. Even when he tried to hide his stress, she picked up on it. It was just a dream. I'm fine, safe and sound. When are you coming back? Soon, I promise. Mrs. Thomas said I could call you anytime, even at night. Mrs. Thomas is right. You can always call me, ma'am. Are you really okay, Dad? You sound tired. Just working on some stuff. But I'm good. How's the volcano project coming? Sophie's voice brightened slightly. Thomas helped me finish the paper mache. We're letting it dry before we paint it. He said it looks really professional. That's great. I can't wait to see it. But will you be there when I present it? The question hit Ethan hard. Sophie's presentation was scheduled for next week, in her normal classroom, with her normal teacher and classmates. Everything that might not exist anymore if this plan failed. I'm going to do everything I can to be there, Ethan said carefully. But if something comes up, Thomas can record it for me, okay? Okay. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Dad? I'm scared. I know, baby, but you're safe. Thomas is watching out for you, and I'm handling everything else. Buon. Promise? Promise. After hanging up, Ethan sat with his head in his hands. Victoria had been watching from across the room. She sounds like a good kid, Victoria said softly. She's the best kid. Smart. Brave. Better than I deserve. That's not true. Isn't it? I've spent her entire life lying to her about who I am, what I've done. She thinks I'm just a maintenance worker who fixes broken things. Ethan's voice cracked. She has no idea her father used to kill people for a living. Victoria moved to sit beside him. You did what you had to do to survive, and then you spent 8 years being the best father you could be. That's what matters. Does it? Because right now all I can think about is what happens if this plan fails. If Sentinel gets to me before we get evidence, Sophie becomes an orphan, and she'll never know the truth about any of it. Then we don't fail. Oh. Ethan looked at her. In the dim office light, Victoria's face was determined, the same expression she probably wore in boardrooms when negotiating billion-dollar deals. You make it sound simple, he said. It's not simple, but it's necessary. And I didn't build Hale Dynamics by accepting failure as an option. Marcus interrupted from his monitors. We've got more activity. Sentinels accessing traffic patterns around Red Hook, checking police response times in the area. Ethan stood up, the moment of vulnerability passing. They're planning their approach vector, looking for optimal timing. Which means they're committed, Marcus said. How long do we have? Based on their pattern, I'd say they move tomorrow night, maybe the night after. They'll want darkness and low traffic. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm calling the backup team. Pulled out, getting them ready. For the rest of the night, they prepared. Marcus built a real-time monitoring system that would track any movement near the warehouse. Victoria coordinated with her security team and lawyers. Ethan reviewed tactical scenarios, trying to anticipate how Sentinel would approach. Dawn came gray and cold. Ethan stood at the office window watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, Sentinel operatives were preparing too, checking equipment, reviewing plans, getting ready to eliminate a target they'd been hunting for 12 years. You should eat something, Victoria said, appearing beside him with a bagel and coffee. Not hungry. Eat anyway. You need your strength. Ethan took the bagel but didn't bite into it. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because you owe me. There's something else. Victoria was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. After you saved me, she said finally, I spent years trying to figure out who you were. It became this obsession, this mystery I couldn't solve. But the more I searched, the more I realized it wasn't really about finding you. It was about proving to myself that good people still existed, that someone could do the right thing without expecting anything in return. She turned to look at him. You represented something I'd lost faith in, and I needed to believe that kind of person was real. And now that you found me, am I what you expected? No, you're better, because you're not perfect. You're flawed and scared and doing your best to protect someone you love. That's more real than any hero I imagined. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. For 12 years, he'd kept everyone at arm's length. No close relationships, no deep connections, just surface-level interactions designed to maintain cover and avoid attachments. But Victoria was different. She saw through the maintenance worker disguise to the broken operative underneath. And instead of running away, she'd chosen to stand beside him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up, even when I told you to." Victoria smiled. "I don't give up easily. It's kind of my thing." Marcus's voice cut through the moment. "I've got movement. 3 vehicles just entered the Red Hook industrial zone." Ethan and Victoria rushed to the monitors. The screen showed grainy footage from the warehouse cameras. 3 black SUVs moving slowly through the empty streets. Professional, careful. Exactly how Sentinel would approach. "Timestamp says this is from 4 minutes ago," Marcus said. "They're doing early reconnaissance." "Are they coming to the warehouse?" "Not yet, just circling the area, getting familiar with the terrain." Ethan watched the vehicles move. They're checking escape routes, making sure there are no surprises. "So they're definitely planning to hit tonight?" "Looks like it." Victoria grabbed her phone. "I'm activating the backup team." "Tell them to stay back," Ethan warned. "If Sentinel spots them, this whole thing falls apart." For the next hour, they tracked Sentinel's movements. The vehicles circled the area twice, then disappeared. Professional reconnaissance. Exactly what Ethan would have done in their position. "They'll be back after dark," he said. "Probably around 2 or 3 in the morning when traffic is lowest." Marcus started checking equipment. "Cameras are all functional, audio recording ready. We'll capture everything." "And the backup team?" Victoria asked. "Positioned 2 blocks away, ready to move on your signal." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. After 12 years of running, he was finally going to face his past head-on. Either it would set him free or it would kill him. Probably no middle ground. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Ethan tried to rest but couldn't. His mind kept running through scenarios. What if Sentinel brought more people than expected? What if they spotted the cameras? What if the backup team couldn't get there in time? Around noon, he called Sophie. "How's it going, kiddo?" "Good. We painted the volcano. It looks really cool. I used red and orange for the lava flows like you suggested." "That's great. When are you coming to see it?" "Soon, real soon. You promise?" Ethan thought about the warehouse in Red Hook, about the men coming to kill him tonight. "I promise I'm going to try my hardest." After hanging up, he found Victoria in the back office, reviewing legal documents. "Your lawyers ready?" he asked. "Ready as they can be. The moment we have evidence, they'll file for emergency protective orders and force a federal investigation." She looked up from her papers. "But Ethan, even if this works, the legal process takes time. You and Sophie might need to stay in protective custody for months while everything gets sorted out. Months away from normal life. Better than years of running." "Yeah, I guess." Victoria stood up and walked over to him. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No, just scared. It's been a long time since I was this scared." "That's not a bad thing. Fear keeps you sharp. Or gets you killed." "Not tonight. Tonight you're going to be smart and careful. And when this is over, you're going to walk out of that warehouse and go hug your daughter." Ethan wanted to believe her. But he'd seen too many operations go wrong. Too many carefully laid plans fall apart in the chaos of real combat. "If something happens to me," he said quietly, "make sure Sophie's taken care of. There's money in an account under my real name, documents that prove who she is. Make sure she gets everything." Nothing's going to happen to you." "But if it does, Ethan," Victoria grabbed his hand. "Nothing is going to happen. We're going to get the evidence, expose Wolf, and end this. Believe that." He squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her certainty. "Okay," he said. "I believe." At 6 that evening, they moved to a surveillance van parked 3 blocks from the warehouse. Marcus had equipped it with monitors showing every camera angle, audio receivers, communication equipment. everything they needed to coordinate the operation. Ethan sat in the back, checking the gear he'd carry. A wire for recording conversations, a small camera clipped to his jacket, two-way radio with an earpiece, and a gun he hoped he wouldn't need. "The backup team is in position," Victoria said, monitoring her phone. 6 men, armed and ready. "Tell them to stay hidden until we have confirmation sentinels actually entering the warehouse. We need them on camera, making the move." Understood. At 11 p.m., Marcus spotted the first sign of activity. Vehicle approaching from the east, same make and model as this afternoon. Ethan moved to the monitors. A black SUV rolled slowly down the empty street, its headlights off. "That's them." The SUV stopped 2 blocks from the warehouse. 3 men got out, all dressed in dark tactical gear. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover different angles. "Sentinel?" Victoria asked. "Has to be. No one else moves like that." Marcus adjusted the camera zoom. "I'm recording everything." The 3 men approached the warehouse carefully, checking windows and doors. One of them pulled out what looked like thermal imaging equipment. "They're scanning for heat signatures," Ethan said, "making sure no one's inside." "But you're not there yet." Exactly. Which means they'll probably do one more pass before they commit. "Give me 20 minutes, then I'll head over." Victoria looked alarmed. 20 minutes? That's not much time. "It's enough. They'll sweep the building, confirm it's empty, then regroup. That's when I show up. Make it look like I just arrived. This is insane. This is necessary." Ethan grabbed his gear and moved toward the van's back door. Victoria caught his arm. "Be careful." "Always am." He slipped out of the van into the cold November night. The walk to the warehouse took 15 minutes. Ethan approached from the north, using the same route he'd planned earlier, staying in shadows, moving quietly. The building loomed ahead, dark and silent. His earpiece crackled, Marcus's voice. "Sentinel team just left. They did a full sweep. Building's clear, but they'll be back." "How long?" 30 minutes, maybe less." Ethan reached the north entrance and slipped inside. The warehouse felt different at night, darker, more menacing. Shadows pooled in corners where moonlight couldn't reach. He moved to the center of the floor space and waited. His heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get out before Sentinel returned. But he stayed. For Sophie. For Victoria. For the chance to finally stop running. "I'm in position," he said quietly into the radio. Victoria's voice came through the earpiece. Tense, but controlled. "Backup team is ready. The moment things go bad, they move." Understood. "Ethan? Yeah? Don't die. Sophie needs you." "I know." He turned off his radio and stood in the darkness, waiting for killers to arrive. The wait felt longer than it actually was. Ethan stood motionless in the center of the warehouse, controlling his breathing the way he'd been trained years ago. Slow inhale through the nose. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale through the mouth. His heart rate steadied, but the adrenaline kept flowing, sharpening his senses to painful clarity. He could hear everything. Wind rattling loose sheet metal on the roof. Distant traffic from the expressway. The creak of old timber settling in the cold. Then new sounds. Footsteps outside. Multiple sets. Moving with tactical precision. Ethan's hand drifted toward the gun, hidden at his back, then stopped. This only worked if they thought he was alone and unprepared. A target, not a threat. The east door opened slowly. 3 figures entered, backlit by moonlight filtering through broken windows. They spread out immediately, covering angles like professionals. Ethan turned on his flashlight, deliberately making himself visible. All 3 weapons came up, laser sights painting red dots across his chest. "Don't move," one of them said. Male voice. Calm. No emotion. Ethan raised his hand slowly, the flashlight still gripped in his right hand. "I'm not armed." That was technically a lie, but they'd discover the gun soon enough anyway. The leader stepped forward. He was maybe 40, built like someone who spent serious time in the gym. Former military written all over his posture and movement. "Ethan Cole," the man said. Not a question. Or should I say Brooklyn? Hearing his old call sign sent ice through Ethan's veins. "Who sent you?" "You know who sent us. Same person who's been looking for you for 12 years. Wolf. Commander Wolf doesn't like loose ends, and you, Brooklyn, are a very dangerous loose end. One of the other operatives moved behind Ethan, patting him down efficiently, found the gun and radio, took both. Wire, the third operative said, spotting the recording device clipped to Ethan's jacket. The leader smiled without warmth. Recording us? That's ambitious, but also stupid. He ripped the wire off and crushed it under his boot. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. The wire was just backup. The real cameras were hidden in the ceiling, still recording everything. So what now? Ethan asked. You kill me here? Make it look like an accident? Us. Nothing that complicated. You disappear. Your daughter goes into the system. Eventually, everyone forgets you existed. The leader pulled out a phone and typed something. I'm letting the commander know we have you. He'll want confirmation before we proceed. This was the critical moment. The leader had just sent a message to Wolf, creating a direct electronic trail between Sentinel's operation and their employer. In the surveillance van 3 blocks away, Marcus would be capturing everything. Ethan just needed to keep them talking long enough to build an airtight case. I have a question, Ethan said. You're not really in a position to ask questions. What did I do that was so terrible? I didn't expose Caracas, didn't go to the press or the authorities. I just disappeared and tried to live quietly. Why couldn't Wolf leave me alone? Oh. The leader studied him with professional detachment. Because you're a witness to corruption that goes way beyond Caracas. You know about operations in 3 different countries. You've seen faces and heard names that could bring down a network spanning 2 decades. As long as you're alive, you're a threat. So this is just business. Everything's just business. The leader's phone buzzed. He read the message and nodded. Commander Wolf wants proof of death before payment completes, which means we do this here. Behind Ethan, one of the operatives chambered around. This was about to go very wrong very fast. Ethan tensed, preparing to move, knowing his chances were terrible, but seeing no other option. Then the warehouse exploded with light and sound. Victoria's backup team came through every entrance simultaneously, rifles raised and voices shouting commands. Federal agents, drop your weapons, hands where we can see them. It was a bluff. The backup team weren't actually federal agents, but they looked official enough in tactical gear, and the element of surprise worked. The Sentinel operatives hesitated, caught between training that said fight and instincts that said this operation had just been compromised. In that moment of hesitation, Ethan moved. He dropped low and swept the legs out from under the operative behind him. The man went down hard, his weapon clattering across concrete. Ethan grabbed it and rolled behind a support pillar as the situation descended into chaos. The leader was shouting into his radio while returning fire toward the backup team. Muzzle flashes lit the warehouse like strobes. Bullets sparked off metal and punched holes in walls. Ethan stayed behind cover, his heart slamming against his ribs. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to get evidence and testimony, not a firefight. Ethan! Victoria's voice in his earpiece, frantic. Get out! North exit! He started moving, staying low, using pillars and debris for cover. One of the Sentinel operatives spotted him and raised his weapon. Ethan fired first. The operative went down clutching his shoulder, and Ethan felt sick. He'd spent 8 years trying to leave violence behind. 8 years being a father instead of a soldier. But apparently, you never really stopped being what you were trained to be. He reached the north exit and burst through into cold night air. The surveillance van was already pulling up, Marcus driving while Victoria threw open the side door. Get in! Ethan jumped inside and the van accelerated before the door even closed. Behind them, the firefight continued. Sirens wailed in the distance, actual police responding to reports of gunshots. Victoria pulled Ethan away from the door and checked him for injuries. Are you hit? No, I'm fine. That was insane. They were supposed to just talk, gather evidence, not start a war. Marcus navigated through empty streets, putting distance between them and the warehouse. We got everything on camera, the whole conversation, the leader confirming Wolf sent them, the message he sent, all of it. Is it enough? Ethan asked. For a federal investigation? Absolutely. We've got Sentinel operatives admitting to attempted murder on behalf of a former military commander. That's conspiracy. Attempted assassination. Multiple felonies. Victoria was already on her phone calling her lawyers. Get the evidence to the FBI immediately. I want protective custody arranged for Ethan Cole and his daughter within the hour. And I want a federal warrant issued for Commander James Wolfe tonight. She ended the call and looked at Ethan. It's over. We did it. But Ethan didn't feel relief. He felt numb and shaky and still wired from combat adrenaline. I shot someone, he said quietly. You defended yourself. I shot someone. After 8 years of trying to leave that behind, Victoria gripped his hand. You did what you had to do to survive. That's not the same thing as what you were before. Marcus pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a nondescript office building. This is a safe house, owned by one of Victoria's shell companies. We'll wait here until the FBI arrives. They went inside and Ethan immediately called Thomas. Is Sophie okay? She's fine, sleeping. What happened? No, it's over. Tell her I'm coming to see her tomorrow. Tell her everything's going to be okay. You sure about that? Ethan looked at Victoria and Marcus, both working phones and laptops to coordinate with lawyers and federal agents. Yeah, he said, I'm sure. The FBI arrived 90 minutes later. 2 agents in dark suits who looked like they'd been pulled out of bed, which they probably had. They watched the warehouse footage 3 times, asking detailed questions about Sentinel Solutions and Commander Wolfe. This is substantial evidence, the senior agent said. We'll need formal statements from all of you. And Mr. Cole, you'll need to provide details about the Caracas operation and everything you witnessed during your time with Unit 17. I'll tell you everything, Ethan said. On one condition, my daughter gets full protection, new identities if necessary. Whatever it takes to keep her safe. We can arrange witness protection. Not witness protection, real protection, the kind that actually works. The agent looked at Victoria. Ms. Hale, I understand you've offered private security arrangements? Let's see, whatever Ethan and Sophie need, Victoria confirmed. My company has resources the government doesn't, and I'm personally invested in their safety. The agents exchanged glances. The senior one nodded. All right, we'll coordinate with your security team. But Mr. Cole, you need to understand that testifying against Wolfe and exposing these operations will make you a target for a long time, maybe forever. I've been a target for 12 years, Ethan said. At least now I'm fighting back. Over the next 72 hours, everything moved fast. Federal agents raided Sentinel Solutions headquarters and arrested 6 employees, including the 3 operatives from the warehouse. Commander James Wolfe was picked up at his Virginia home, charged with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. The story broke in the media like a bomb. Former covert operative exposes corruption. Billionaire CEO helps bring down assassination network. Shadowy military contractors arrested. Victoria's PR team worked overtime, managing the narrative, while her lawyers coordinated with federal prosecutors. And through it all, Ethan stayed in protective custody, giving detailed testimony about Caracas and every other operation he'd witnessed. It was exhausting and painful, dredging up memories he'd spent years trying to bury. But it was also freeing. For 12 years, he'd lived with the weight of secrets. Lies built on lies, built on lies. Now everything was coming out into the light, the good and the bad, the things he'd done and the things he'd witnessed, all of it. On the 4th day, Victoria drove him upstate to see Sophie. The property was beautiful in late autumn, trees showing bare branches against gray sky. The main house was modern and comfortable, with enough security to make Fort Knox jealous. Thomas met them at the door. She's been asking about you non-stop. I told her you were handling important business and would explain everything when you got here. Sophie was in the library, her volcano project spread across a table. When she saw Ethan, she ran to him and threw her arms around his waist. Dad! Ethan held her tight, feeling tears burn his eyes. Hey, kiddo. I missed you. I missed you too. Are we going home? Not yet, but soon. I promise, he said. Sophie pulled back and looked at Victoria. You're the lady from the phone. That's right. I'm Victoria. Dad said you're helping us. I'm trying. Sophie studied Victoria with those 2 perceptive eyes. Are you and my dad friends? Victoria glanced at Ethan, uncertain how to answer. Ethan knelt down to Sophie's level. Victoria is someone very important, someone I helped a long time ago. And now she's helping us when we need it. Like how you help people who are stuck or in trouble? Exactly like that. Sophie seemed to accept this. She grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward the table. Come see my volcano. Thomas helped me make it really good. The volcano was indeed impressive. Detailed paintwork showing lava flows and rock formations. Sophie had even added small trees and figures around the base. This is amazing, Ethan said honestly. I'm going to present it next week. You'll be there, right? Ethan looked at Victoria, who nodded slightly. I'll be there, he said. I promise. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat in the library with glasses of wine. Neither of them were really drinking. The prosecutors say Wolf will likely take a plea deal, Victoria said. 20 years minimum, in exchange for testimony about the broader network. So it's really over. The immediate threat, yes. But Ethan, there will be others. People connected to these operations who might see you as a problem. I know, which is why I need to ask you something. Ethan set down his wine glass. The protective security you offered, is that just until the trial or longer? As long as you need it. I meant what I said. Whatever you and Sophie need. That's generous? Maybe too generous. Victoria smiled slightly. I can afford it. Oi, it's not about money, it's about why. Why you're still here, still helping. You've already paid back whatever debt you think you owed me. Victoria was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. When I was 23 and trapped in that subway tunnel, I thought I was going to die, she said finally. And I remember thinking how unfair it was, how I had all these plans and dreams and things I wanted to do. Then you appeared and gave me a second chance at life. She looked at Ethan. I built Hale Dynamics because I didn't want to waste that second chance. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what actually matters isn't the company or the money or the success. It's the people, the connections, the moments that remind you why you're alive. And this is one of those moments? This is me realizing that helping you and Sophie matters more than any business deal I've ever made, because you're real. And what we're doing here is real. And that's worth more than anything I could put on a balance sheet. Ethan felt something shift between them. A connection that went deeper than gratitude or obligation. Sophie asked me earlier if we were friends, he said quietly. What did you tell her, Tom? That you were someone important, someone helping us. Is that all I am? Ethan met her eyes. No, you're someone who sees me. Not the maintenance worker disguise or the broken operative I used to be, just me. And that's something I haven't had in a very long time. Victoria reached across and took his hand. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just being present. Outside, wind moved through bare trees and security lights illuminated the grounds. For the first time in 12 years, Ethan felt something close to peace. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Ethan testified for 3 days, laying out everything he knew about Unit 17's operations, the illegal missions, the corruption, the people who died because someone decided they knew too much. It was brutal and exhausting, but necessary. Commander Wolf sat in the defendant's chair looking smaller than Ethan remembered. Just a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, not the terrifying figure who'd haunted Ethan's nightmares for years. When Ethan finished testifying, Wolf's lawyer tried to discredit him, painted him as a disgraced operative with an axe to grind, someone who'd failed psychologically and invented conspiracy theories to justify his own failures. But the evidence spoke louder than any character assassination. Financial records showing payments to Wolf from criminal organizations. Communications between Wolf and Sentinel Solutions. Testimony from other operatives who'd survived and were finally willing to talk. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Guilty on all counts, Wolf would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. When the verdict came down, Ethan was sitting in a private room with Victoria and Sophie. It's over, Victoria said, reading the text from her lawyer. Sophie looked up from her book. Does that mean we can go home? Ethan pulled her close. It means we can start figuring out what home looks like now. Over the next few months, life slowly found a new normal. Ethan gave up the Brooklyn apartment and moved into a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood where Sophie could walk to a good school. Victoria's security team kept watch but stayed invisible, just insurance against unlikely threats. Sophie adjusted remarkably well, all things considered. She made new friends, joined the science club, continued building elaborate volcano projects and asking questions about how things worked. Ethan found work as a security consultant for Hale Dynamics, using his skills in ways that helped, instead of hurt. Training teams, identifying vulnerabilities, making sure people stayed safe. It wasn't quite the quiet, anonymous life he'd planned, but it was better in ways he hadn't expected. And Victoria became part of their world in a way that felt natural, despite how unlikely it should have been. She came to Sophie's school presentations, helped with homework when Ethan was traveling for work, taught Sophie about business and leadership and what it meant to build something meaningful. "Is Victoria your girlfriend?" Sophie asked one night over dinner. Ethan nearly choked on his water. "What? You spend a lot of time together, and she looks at you the way Jenny's mom looks at Jenny's dad." "It's complicated, kiddo." Adults always say that when they don't want to explain something. Victoria, who'd been invited for dinner and was currently setting the table, laughed. "Sophie's not wrong." "Helpful," Ethan said dryly. After dinner, while Sophie did homework in her room, Ethan and Victoria cleaned up together. "She's right, you know," Victoria said, drying dishes. "It is complicated." "Is it, though? Or are we just making it complicated?" Victoria set down the dish towel and turned to face him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for 12 years I've been running from my past and hiding from any kind of real connection. But you changed that. You saw someone worth saving when I'd given up on saving myself, and now I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Ethan, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." Victoria stepped closer. "What if I'm asking for something?" "Like what?" "Well, like, maybe we stop pretending this is just about debt or obligation. Maybe we admit that somewhere between that subway tunnel and now, this became something real." Ethan felt his heart beating faster. "You want that? With me? With all my baggage and complications? I built a $40 billion company. I think I can handle complicated." She kissed him, and Ethan felt 12 years of walls come down. When they pulled apart, Sophie was standing in the hallway with a knowing smile. "Finally," she said. "I thought you two were going to dance around this forever." Ethan laughed despite himself. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough. So does this mean Victoria's staying for breakfast?" Victoria looked at Ethan, who nodded. "Yep, Victoria said. "I think I am." 6 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Ethan stood in the subway station where it all began. The memorial plaque commemorating the victims of the fire was polished and clean, flowers left by families who still remembered. Sophie was beside him, reading the names. Victoria stood on his other side, her hand in his. "Is this where you saved Victoria?" Sophie asked. "Yeah, right here. And that's why she's been helping us. It's up." "That's part of it. But mostly she's helping us because she's a good person who sees value in giving people second chances." Sophie looked at Victoria. "I'm glad Dad saved you." "Me too," Victoria said. "Best thing that ever happened to me." They stood there for a while, the three of them, as commuters rushed past on their way to wherever they needed to be. Ethan thought about how much had changed since that night 12 years ago. How one decision to help a stranger had set in motion everything that followed. The running, the hiding, the fear, but also Sophie, and now Victoria, and a life that felt real instead of constructed. Sometimes the right choice was the hardest one. Sometimes doing good meant risking everything. And sometimes the people you saved ended up saving you right back. That was the thing about second chances. They went both ways. "Come on," Victoria said, squeezing his hand. "Let's go home." And for the first time in as long as Ethan could remember, he knew exactly where home was. It wasn't a place. It was the people standing beside him. Sophie with her endless curiosity and big heart. Victoria with her strength and determination to make the world better. And himself finally free from the shadows of a past that no longer defined him. They walked up into the sunlight together, leaving the memorial behind. Above them, the city hummed with life. Millions of people living their own stories, making their own choices, finding their own second chances. Ethan Cole had spent 12 years invisible, hiding from a past that refused to stay buried. But Victoria Hale had spent $60 million searching for someone she'd never forgotten. And in the end, they'd both found exactly what they needed. Not closure, not debt repaid. Just connection. Just love. Just the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of choosing to be seen. Sophie ran ahead on the sidewalk, her backpack bouncing, calling back for them to hurry up. Ethan and Victoria followed hand in hand, walking toward whatever came next. Together,